The music academy stood at the corner of a quiet street, painted in soft cream colors that had faded a little over the years. Every afternoon, children walked through its glass doors carrying violin cases, sheet music folders, and big dreams. Inside, the halls were always filled with small sounds. Fingers running across piano keys, nervous laughter before lessons, teachers clapping softly in rhythm. Among those students was a 10-year-old girl who rarely spoke unless someone asked her a direct question. She was small for her age, with careful movements and watchful eyes. While other children rushed in and out of lessons, she moved slowly, as if she did not want to disturb the air around her. Music was the only place where she did not seem unsure. Her family did not have much money. The academy had given her a partial scholarship after her audition the year before. During that audition, she had played an old upright piano with chipped paint and slightly uneven keys. Still, the room had gone quiet the moment she began. She did not just press the keys. She listened to them. She felt them. Even the teachers had exchanged surprised looks. Since then, she had practiced harder than anyone else. Every day after school, she would finish her homework at the kitchen table while her mother prepared dinner. Then she would walk to the academy alone, carrying her music book close to her chest. She never wasted time. While others chatted in the hallway, she slipped into the practice rooms. The recital hall was her favorite place. In the center of that hall stood a beautiful grand piano. It was polished black, smooth as glass, and much larger than the upright piano she had at home. The first time she touched it, her hands trembled, felt powerful, almost alive. She was not supposed to practice there without permission. But sometimes, when the hall was empty and a door was left slightly open, she would quietly step inside. She never meant any harm. She only wanted to hear how the music sounded in a bigger space. That afternoon, the sky outside was gray. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows. Most students had already left. A teacher was finishing a lesson down the hallway. The building felt calm. The girl stood near the recital hall door, looking inside. The grand piano waited in the center of the room. No one was there. She hesitated. Then she stepped in. Her fingers hovered over the keys at first. She pressed one note gently. The sound filled the room, richer and deeper than the small piano at home. She smiled to herself. She began to play a piece she had been practicing for weeks. It was not an easy piece. It had strong chords and fast runs. Her teacher had once told her it was advanced for her age, but she had insisted on trying. At first, her playing was soft. The notes floated through the empty hall. But as the music grew louder, she leaned into it. Her small hands moved quickly, pressing the keys with more confidence. She forgot about the world outside the room. She forgot about the rain. She forgot about everything except the sound. She reached the most powerful part of the piece, the section filled with bold, dramatic chords. Her shoulders lifted with effort as she struck the keys. Then it happened. A sharp cracking sound burst from inside the piano. It was loud, much louder than any note she had played. Her hands froze in midair. For a second, she thought she had imagined it. But then came another strange noise, like metal snapping under pressure. The beautiful sound of the piano turned into a rough, trembling vibration. The girl jumped back from the bench. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. Footsteps rushed down the hallway. A teacher pushed the door open. "What happened?" the teacher asked sharply. The girl could not answer. She simply stared at the piano. Another staff member arrived. They lifted the lid and looked inside. Their faces changed immediately. The calm expressions turned into shock. "The strings," one of them whispered. Several of the thick metal strings inside the piano had snapped. A piece of wood near the soundboard showed a thin crack. It was not something that happened every day. The teacher turned slowly toward the girl. "What did you do?" The question felt heavy. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her throat felt tight. She had only been playing. She had not hit the keys with anger. She had not done anything reckless. She had simply followed the music. "I was just practicing," she finally said in a small voice. The adults exchanged looks. Other students began peeking through the doorway, whispering. The quiet building was no longer calm. Within minutes, the director of the academy was called in. He examined the damage carefully. The piano was expensive, the pride of the school. It had been used in competitions and special concerts. "Were you alone in here?" he asked. She nodded. "Did anyone give you permission to use this piano?" She shook her head. The air in the room felt colder. The director sighed deeply. "This instrument costs more than most cars," he said. "Do you understand that?" Tears gathered in her eyes. She did not fully understand the cost. She only understood that something was very wrong. Someone mentioned calling a repair technician. Someone else muttered about responsibility. The word damage was repeated again and again. The girl stood still, feeling smaller with every sentence. Soon, her mother was called and asked to come immediately. While waiting, the staff asked the girl to sit in the hallway. Students walked past her slowly, staring. A few whispered behind their hands. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor tiles. She replayed the moment in her mind. The strong chords, the crack, the sound. Had she pressed too hard? Had she done something wrong without realizing it? Her mother arrived, breathing fast from rushing through the rain. She looked confused and worried. The director explained the situation carefully but firmly. He spoke about the broken strings, the crack, the repair costs. He said the damage had happened while the girl was alone with the instrument. Her mother listened quietly, holding her daughter's cold hands. "She would never do something careless," her mother said softly. "We are not saying it was intentional," the director replied. "But the fact remains, it happened during her practice." The girl looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "I was just playing," she whispered. Her mother squeezed her hand. "I know," she said. The conversation grew serious. Numbers were mentioned. The cost of repairing a grand piano was high, far beyond what her family could easily afford. The rain outside grew heavier. By the time they left the building, the girl felt as if the world had changed in a single hour. The same hallways where she once felt safe now seemed distant and unfriendly. That night, she did not touch the piano at home. She sat on her bed, staring at her hands. The hands that once made her feel strong now felt like strangers. Across town, messages were already spreading among parents. Some said she had been too rough. Others said children should not be allowed near expensive instruments. No one yet questioned whether the piano itself might have had a hidden weakness. Inside her small bedroom, she heard her parents talking in low voices. She could not make out every word, but she heard enough: repair, payment, responsibility. She pulled her knees to her chest. The music that once filled her heart now felt heavy. She did not know that this moment, this frightening, confusing afternoon, would soon travel far beyond the walls of that academy. All she knew was that a loud crack had changed everything. The next morning felt different from any other morning. The house was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet that comes after bad news. The girl woke up early even though she had barely slept. She lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, replaying the sound of the crack in her mind. At breakfast, her parents tried to act normal. Her father asked about school. Her mother reminded her to take her lunch. But their smiles were thin, and their eyes looked tired. Papers were spread across the kitchen table, notes with numbers written on them, repair estimates from the academy, and a business card from the piano technician. No one said much about it directly, but the weight of it sat between them. When she reached school, she noticed the change almost immediately. 2 girls from her class were whispering near the lockers. They stopped when she walked by. One of them looked at her hands for a second before turning away. By lunchtime, the story had grown larger than it really was. Some students said she had jumped on the piano keys. Others said she had slammed the lid shut in anger. One boy even claimed she had been told not to touch it and had done it on purpose. She wanted to correct them, but the words would not come out. Felt like shouting into the wind. After school, instead of walking to the academy like she usually did, she went straight home. Her mother had received a message that morning asking them not to return for lessons until the matter was settled. The words were polite, but the meaning was clear. She stood outside her house for a moment before going in. For the first time in a year, she did not know when she would play again. That evening, her parents sat her down at the small dining table. They did not look angry. They looked worried. "The Academy believes you caused the damage," her father said gently. "I didn't," she replied quickly. Her voice shook. "I was just playing the piece. Like always." "We know," her mother said. "We believe you." Hearing that helped, but only a little. Her father explained that the repair costs were very high. Even if the technician fixed the broken strings, the crack inside the piano could take weeks to repair. It would cost more money than they had saved. "Are we going to have to pay for it?" she asked. Her parents exchanged a look. "We are trying to figure that out," her father answered. That night, she sat in front of the old upright piano at home. She opened the lid slowly. The keys looked the same as always, slightly worn but familiar. She placed her fingers on them but did not press down. What if something broke again? The thought scared her more than she wanted to admit. For the next few days, the Academy stayed silent. No calls, no updates, but the whispers grew louder. Parents who once smiled at her mother during pickup now avoided eye contact. One even suggested, in a careful tone, that maybe the girl had been too ambitious for her age. The words hurt. Music had never felt like ambition to her. Felt like breathing. By the end of the week, an official letter arrived from the Academy. It stated that after reviewing the situation, they considered her responsible for the damage because she had used the recital hall without permission. Until financial responsibility was discussed, her scholarship was suspended. Suspended. The word felt heavier than charged. Felt like being pushed out. She read the letter twice, even though she wished she had not. The next day, her mother went to speak with the Academy director in person. The girl waited at home, sitting by the window. The sky looked pale and cold. When her mother returned, she looked exhausted. "They say the piano was in perfect condition before," she explained quietly. "They believe the strong playing caused the damage." The girl stared at her hands again. They were small. Could small hands really break something so big? Over the weekend, she avoided her piano. She spent more time in her room, reading or staring at nothing. When her father gently suggested she practice a little, she shook her head. "What if I break ours too?" she whispered. Her father sat beside her. "Instruments are meant to be played," he said. "They don't break because of music. Not like that." But doubt had already settled in her heart. On Monday, something unexpected happened. The piano technician who had examined the grand instrument called her father. He wanted to clarify something. According to him, the strings that snapped were under extreme tension. Over time, changes in temperature and humidity could weaken parts inside the piano. He did not say she was innocent. He did not say she was guilty. But he mentioned that such breaks sometimes happened without warning, especially during powerful passages. Her father listened carefully. When he hung up, there was a small spark of hope in his eyes. "He said it could have been building up for a long time," her father told her. "Then why are they blaming me?" she asked. He did not have a clear answer. The Academy, however, did not change its position. In another short message, they reminded her family that the damage occurred during her unauthorized use of the recital hall. Responsibility, they insisted, remained. Felt unfair. Days turned into a slow routine of silence. She no longer walked past the Academy. She took a different route home to avoid seeing the building. One afternoon, while cleaning her room, her mother found a small notebook filled with handwritten music. The girl had been trying to compose her own melodies for months, writing notes carefully in pencil. Her mother sat beside her on the bed. "You love this," she said softly, holding up the notebook. The girl nodded, tears filling her eyes. "But maybe I'm not meant for it." The sentence broke her mother's heart. "You are not defined by one accident," her mother said firmly. "And you are not guilty just because someone says so." Still, doubt is hard to erase. One evening, a neighbor stopped by to drop off some mail that had been delivered by mistake. She mentioned hearing about the piano incident. "I'm sure it was just too much force," the neighbor said casually. "These big instruments are delicate." The girl listened from the hallway. The word force echoed in her mind. Was her music forceful? She remembered the powerful chords she had played that day. She had felt strong, confident. For the first time, she had not been afraid of the sound. Now that strength felt like a mistake. Weeks passed. The academy scheduled a formal meeting to discuss payment options. Her parents prepared carefully, bringing the technician's comments and asking for a full inspection report. On the day of the meeting, the girl stayed home. She paced around the living room while waiting. When her parents returned, their expressions were mixed. The academy had agreed to review the piano's maintenance records. Apparently, the instrument had not undergone a full internal inspection in several years. There had been small signs of wear noted in earlier reports. It was not a full apology, but it was not complete blame either. For the first time since the incident, she felt a tiny bit of air return to her lungs. That night, she walked slowly to the upright piano at home. She lifted the lid and pressed one key. The sound was soft and steady. She pressed another. Nothing broke. Her hands moved carefully at first, almost afraid. But as the melody began to form, something inside her shifted. The music did not accuse her. It did not judge her. It simply responded. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she played. She realized something important in that quiet moment. The piano at the academy may have cracked, but her love for music had not. Outside, the world was still whispering. The academy had not cleared her name yet. The repair bill was still unresolved. The future was uncertain. But inside her small living room, a simple melody filled the space. And this time, she did not stop playing. The days that followed felt slower than usual, as if time itself was unsure which side to stand on. The academy had not fully blamed her anymore, but they had not cleared her either. Everything was stuck in the middle. For a 10-year-old, that space in between felt harder than a clear answer. At school, the whispers had softened, but they had not disappeared. Some classmates had already moved on to new topics. Others still glanced at her with quiet curiosity. She learned to keep her head down and focus on her work. But something inside her had changed. Before the incident, she used to count the minutes until she could practice. Now she found herself hesitating before sitting at the piano. Not because she stopped loving music, but because she was afraid of loving it too much. One afternoon, her father came home earlier than usual. He held a small envelope in his hand. "The technician sent a full written report," he said. They sat together at the kitchen table while he read it out loud. The report explained that the snap strings showed signs of metal fatigue. The wood near the soundboard had hairline cracks that likely formed over time due to humidity changes. The powerful chords played that afternoon may have triggered the final break. But the weakness had been there long before. The girl listened carefully. "So it wasn't just me?" she asked quietly. Her father looked at her with steady eyes. "No. It wasn't just you." For the first time since that rainy afternoon, her shoulders relaxed. The academy scheduled another meeting after receiving the technician's report. This time, both of her parents attended again. The girl stayed home, but the waiting felt different. There was a small thread of hope woven into the worry. When her parents returned, her mother's face held something she had not seen in weeks: relief. They reviewed the maintenance records, her mother said. The piano had not been fully serviced in a long time. There were notes about tension issues in previous inspections. Her father nodded. They admitted the damage could have happened sooner or later. It wasn't caused by one person alone. The girl sat still, letting the words settle. "Does that mean I can go back?" she asked. Her parents exchanged another look. "They are still deciding about the scholarship," her father said carefully. "But they are reconsidering the payment request." It was not a complete victory, but it felt like the truth was finally being heard. A few days later, something unexpected happened. A student who had been in the hallway the day of the incident sent her a message. The student had remembered seeing a staff member testing the piano earlier that week, mentioning that one of the bass notes sounded strained. "I didn't think it mattered at the time," the message said. "But maybe it does." The girl showed the message to her parents. Every small piece of information felt like another light turning on in a dark room. Meanwhile, she slowly began practicing again at home. At first, she played simple pieces, soft ones. But as her confidence returned, she found herself reaching for the same advanced piece she had been playing the day the piano broke. Her hands paused above the keys. She remembered the crack, the shock, the accusing silence. Then she took a deep breath and began. The strong chords came again, filling the small living room. This time nothing snapped, nothing trembled. The piano held steady. Her father stood in the doorway listening. He did not clap or interrupt. He just let her finish. When she reached the final note, she looked up, almost surprised. "You see," he said gently, "music is not your enemy." At the academy, discussions continued behind closed doors. Some teachers had started questioning the quick judgment made that day. A few quietly admitted they may have reacted too fast. One teacher, who had always believed in her talent, suggested something important during a staff meeting. "What if we are focusing on the wrong thing?" the teacher asked. "Instead of asking who broke the piano, maybe we should ask why it broke." The room had gone quiet. That question shifted the tone of the conversation. Soon after, her family received another letter. This one sounded different from the first. It acknowledged that the instrument had underlying structural weaknesses. It also stated that the academy would cover most of the repair costs through insurance. Most. There was still a small portion they were asked to contribute because she had used the hall without permission. But the amount was far lower than before. More importantly, the letter ended with something new. An invitation to return for lessons once repairs were complete. She read the letter twice, just like she had read the first one. But this time her chest felt lighter. "Does this mean they don't think I destroyed it anymore?" she asked. Her mother smiled softly. "It means they understand it was not that simple." The story, however, had already traveled beyond the academy walls. Parents who once whispered now heard the updated explanation. Some apologized quietly. Others avoided the topic altogether. One afternoon, while practicing at home with the window slightly open, she did not realize that a neighbor was recording a short video. The neighbor had always enjoyed listening to her play in the evenings. That day, the music sounded stronger than ever. The video was simple, just a child at a piano in a small living room, playing with deep focus. But there was something powerful in the way she moved through the difficult parts without fear. The neighbor later shared the video online with a short caption about what had happened at the academy and how the full story was finally coming out. Within days, the video began spreading. At first, it was shared by friends and family. Then local community pages picked it up. People left comments about her courage and dedication. Some mentioned how quickly people judge without knowing all the facts. She did not see the video right away. She was too busy catching up on schoolwork and preparing herself mentally to return to the academy. When her parents finally showed her the growing number of views, she stared at the screen in disbelief. "They're saying nice things," her mother said. The comments were filled with encouragement. Strangers wrote about believing in young talent. Musicians shared their own stories of being blamed for things beyond their control. For the first time since the incident, she did not feel alone. The academy also noticed the attention. What had started as a small internal issue was now being discussed publicly in a very different light. The focus had shifted from blame to resilience. A week later, she received a personal call from the teacher who had once supported her audition. "We are ready to welcome you back," the teacher said warmly. "And I want you to know, we are proud of how you handled everything." The words brought tears to her eyes. When she finally walked back into the academy building, the hallways felt familiar again. Not everyone smiled, but many did. A few students even approached her with kind words. The grand piano in the recital hall was still under repair, its lid closed and a small sign placed on top. She stopped in front of it for a moment. She did not feel anger. She did not feel fear. She felt stronger. The incident had shaken her confidence, but it had also shown her something important. Truth does not always speak loudly at first, but it finds its way out. As she entered her practice room and placed her hands on the keys, She realized that the crack in that piano had revealed more than just a weakness in wood and metal. It had revealed her own strength. And this time, when she began to play, there was no hesitation at all. The video continued to spread in ways no one expected. What began as a simple recording from an open window slowly moved beyond the neighborhood. It was shared in music groups, then by teachers, then by people who had never even met her. Each share added a new caption. Some wrote about talent. Some wrote about unfair judgment. Others wrote about how quickly people blame before knowing the full story. She did not fully understand how the internet worked, but she understood numbers. When her father showed her the screen and the views had reached thousands, she covered her mouth in shock. "Why are so many people watching?" she asked. "Because they hear something special," her father replied. The comments kept growing. A music instructor from another city wrote that her timing and control were remarkable for someone her age. A professional pianist commented that powerful chords do not break strong instruments, weak maintenance does. That sentence was shared many times. At the academy, teachers began to feel the shift. Parents who once whispered now asked different questions. Some wanted to know when she would perform again. Others asked whether the academy planned to hold a small concert once the grand piano was repaired. The director called her parents for another meeting. This time, the tone was completely different. "We would like to support her," he said carefully. "The attention has shown us that she has real promise. We want to make sure she continues her studies here." Her scholarship was officially restored. The small payment her family had agreed to make was reduced even further. The academy also announced that they would be upgrading their instrument maintenance schedule to prevent future issues. When her parents told her the news, she felt something lift off her chest completely. It was not just about money or school. It was about being believed. Soon after, a local news reporter reached out. The story had caught their attention. They wanted to interview the young girl who had once been blamed for breaking a piano but was now gaining praise online. She felt nervous about speaking on camera. Playing the piano was easy. Talking about herself was not. "Just tell the truth," her mother said. "The same way you told us." The interview was simple. She sat beside the old upright piano at home while the reporter asked gentle questions. "What did you feel that day?" the reporter asked. She thought for a moment. "I felt scared," she said honestly. "I thought maybe my music was too strong. And now," she looked at her hands resting on the keys. "Now I think music is not something to be afraid of." The short news clip aired that evening. People who had not seen the online video now heard her story. Messages began arriving from strangers, encouraging words, stories of similar experiences, even small offers of support. One message stood out. It came from a well-known music teacher in another state who had trained many young performers. "I would like to invite her to attend a weekend masterclass," the message read. "No fee. I believe she has something rare." Her parents read the message twice before showing it to her. "A masterclass?" she asked. She had only heard about such events from older students. "Yes," her father said. "It's a chance to learn from someone experienced." The idea felt both exciting and frightening. The masterclass was held in a larger city auditorium. The building felt bigger than any place she had performed before. Other young pianists were there, some older, some with years of competition experience. When it was her turn to play, her heart beat loudly in her ears. She remembered the crack from weeks ago. She remembered the silence that followed. But she also remembered the video, the comments, the people who believed in her. She sat down at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. The first note came out clear and steady. As she moved through the piece, she did not hold back. She allowed the strong chords to ring out just as she had that rainy afternoon, but this time without fear. The auditorium filled with sound. It did not crack. It did not shake in a bad way. Carried her music forward. When she finished, there was a short silence. Then applause. The instructor approached her with a gentle smile. "Never shrink your sound," the instructor said quietly. "Strength is not a mistake." Those words stayed with her. After the masterclass, more invitations followed. Small community concerts, youth showcases, interviews for music blogs. Each event introduced her story to new people. At first, she worried that she would always be known as the girl who broke a piano. But slowly the story changed. People began calling her the girl whose talent was so powerful it revealed the truth. Back at the academy, the repaired grand piano finally returned to the recital hall. A small reopening concert was planned, and she was asked to perform. Standing backstage that evening, she looked at the polished black surface of the instrument. For a brief moment, the memory of the crack flashed in her mind. Her teacher noticed her hesitation. "It's ready," the teacher said softly. "And so are you." She walked onto the stage to warm applause. The hall was full, students, parents, neighbors, even the reporter who had first shared her story. She sat at the same piano that had once caused so much trouble. The room grew quiet. She began to play. The opening notes floated gently, then grew stronger. When she reached the powerful section, she did not pull back. She pressed the keys with confidence. The sound filled the hall beautifully, without strain. As the final note echoed, the audience rose to their feet. She looked up, surprised by the standing ovation. In that moment, she understood something important. The incident had not ended her journey. It had started a new chapter. After the concert, people approached her with kind words. Some thanked her for reminding them not to judge too quickly. Others simply told her to keep playing. Later that night, as she sat quietly at home, she thought about how quickly life can change. One afternoon, she had been blamed and doubted. Weeks later, she was being encouraged and celebrated. But deep inside, she knew the most important change had happened within her. She was no longer afraid of her own strength. The video continued traveling far beyond her town. Music pages in other countries shared it. Comments appeared in different languages. She could not read all of them, but her father translated a few. "They say your music touched them," he explained. She smiled softly. The same hands that once trembled in fear were now steady and sure. The same chords that once caused worry now carried her forward. And somewhere beyond the small academy, beyond the city, beyond even the country, people were listening. Her music, once blamed for breaking something, was now building something much bigger. It was building hope. And this time, nothing was cracking under the sound. Life did not slow down after the concert. If anything, it began to move faster than she had ever experienced before. Invitations continued to arrive, not in piles, but one by one, steady and surprising. A youth music festival in another city asked if she would perform. A small television program focused on young talent wanted her to share her story. Even a local radio host invited her to talk about how music helped her through difficult moments. At first, her parents were careful. They did not want her to feel overwhelmed. She was still 10 years old. She still had homework, chores, and friends who wanted to play after school. They agreed to choose only a few events and make sure she had time to rest. But no matter how busy things became, one thing stayed the same. She practiced every day. Not because people expected her to. Not because cameras were watching. She practiced because she loved it. The sound of the piano in the living room still felt like home. One evening, after finishing her homework, she sat down to practice a new piece recommended by the instructor from the masterclass. It was softer than the dramatic one that had caused so much trouble months earlier. This piece required patience and control. It asked for feeling rather than force. As she played, she noticed something different in herself. She was not trying to prove anything anymore. Not to the academy. Not to strangers online. Not even to herself. She was simply playing. At school, the whispers had completely stopped. In fact, some classmates now asked her questions about music. A few even said they wanted to learn piano too. She found it strange how quickly opinions can change. The same hallway that once felt cold now felt normal again. One afternoon, the academy director approached her after a lesson. "We have been invited to send a student to represent us at a regional young musicians showcase," he said. "We would like you to go." She blinked in surprise. "Me? Yes," he replied. "Your story has inspired many people. But more than that, your playing has grown stronger." She nodded slowly, feeling both honored and nervous. The showcase was held in a large theater filled with students from different schools. Some had won competitions before. Some had years of formal training. She felt small standing among them. Backstage, she listened to the quiet tuning of instruments and the low hum of the audience beyond the curtain. Her hands felt slightly cold. Her teacher knelt beside her. "Remember," the teacher said softly, "you are not here because of what happened. You are here because of how you play." Those words grounded her. When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage under bright lights. The piano at the center looked strong and polished. She took her seat and adjusted the bench carefully. The first notes floated out gently. The audience grew still. As the piece unfolded, she allowed herself to feel every part of it. The soft beginnings, the rising middle, the strong ending. She did not rush. She did not hold back. When she reached the final chord, she pressed it firmly but calmly. The sound rang out, clear and steady. Applause followed. Not wild or overwhelming, but warm and sincere. Later that evening, one of the judges approached her parents. "She plays with honesty," the judge said. "That is rare at any age." She did not win first prize that night. She placed second. But strangely, she did not feel disappointed. Months ago, she had been afraid to even touch a piano. Now she stood among talented young musicians, confident and steady. On the ride home, she leaned her head against the car window and watched the city lights blur past. "Are you happy?" her mother asked gently. She smiled. "Yes." A few weeks later, something unexpected arrived in the mail. It was a letter from a piano company that had seen her performance online. They offered to lend her a better upright piano for practice at home for 1 year, free of charge. Her parents stared at the letter in disbelief. When the instrument was delivered, she stood quietly as it was carried into the living room. It was larger and richer in sound than the old one she had practiced on for years. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys before playing her first note. The tone filled the room in a way she had never heard before in her own house. Her father laughed softly. "Careful," he joked gently. "Don't break this one too." She paused for a second, then smiled. The joke no longer hurt. "I won't," she said calmly. As months passed, her schedule balanced itself. School during the day, practice in the afternoon, occasional performances on weekends. Her story continued to inspire others, but it no longer defined her. One day, a younger student at the academy approached her after class. "I heard what happened before," the child said shyly. "I get scared playing loud parts too." She thought for a moment before answering. "It's okay to be strong," she said gently. "Just make sure you are listening to the music, not fighting it." The younger student nodded. In that small conversation, she realized how far she had come. She was no longer the girl sitting in a hallway, staring at the floor while adults discussed repair costs. She was someone who could offer comfort. The academy also changed. Regular maintenance checks were scheduled for all instruments. Teachers became more careful about quick judgments. In quiet ways, the incident improved things for everyone. Late one evening, after finishing practice, she stayed seated at the piano longer than usual. The house was quiet. Her parents were in the kitchen, talking softly. She began playing the same advanced piece that had once led to that frightening crack. But this time, something felt different. She was not thinking about proving the instrument was strong. She was not thinking about showing the world her talent. She was thinking about the simple joy she felt the first time she ever touched a piano. When she reached the powerful section, she played it fully, not with fear, not with anger, but with balance. The notes rose and settled like waves. Nothing broke. When she finished, she sat quietly for a moment, letting the last sound fade into the air. Her mother peeked into the room. "That sounded beautiful," she said softly. She turned on the bench and smiled. The journey that began with blame had become something else entirely. It had taught her about strength, patience, and truth. It had shown her that mistakes or even misunderstandings do not have to define a person. Most of all, it had reminded her that talent is not something to hide. Outside, the world continued to move. Videos were still shared. Comments were still written. Invitations still came occasionally. But inside that small living room, none of that mattered as much as the simple sound of her fingers moving across the keys. Her music was no longer something that caused fear. It was something that carried her forward. And this time, she knew she was ready for whatever came next. A full year had passed since the rainy afternoon when a loud crack changed everything. When she thought about that day now, it no longer felt sharp and frightening. It felt distant, like a storm that had rolled through and moved on, leaving behind a clearer sky. Her life had settled into a new rhythm. School in the morning, practice in the afternoon, performances now and then. The borrowed piano in her living room had become part of the family, its polished wood reflecting sunlight during the day and warm lamp light at night. But something else had changed too. She was no longer just practicing for lessons or small concerts. She had begun to understand that her music carried meaning beyond notes and timing. People had written to her about how her story gave them courage. Some said they felt judged in their own lives and were afraid to speak up. Others said they stopped doing what they loved because someone doubted them. She read a few of those messages carefully. One evening, after finishing her homework, she sat quietly at the piano without sheet music. She pressed a few soft notes, then added more, building a melody slowly. It was not one of her assigned pieces. It was something new. Her father looked up from the couch. "Is that a new song?" he asked. "I think so," she said with a small smile. The melody grew stronger in the middle, almost like a question, then softened again at the end. It felt like a conversation without words. She began writing it down in her music notebook. In the months that followed, she continued adding to that melody. It became her own composition. She did not rush it. She let it grow naturally. The academy announced an annual recital near the end of the school year. Students would perform their best pieces. Her teacher suggested she play something impressive from a well-known composer. But she hesitated. "I want to play something different," she said. Her teacher looked curious. "What do you have in mind?" She opened her notebook and showed the handwritten notes. "You wrote this?" the teacher asked, surprised. She nodded. The teacher studied the pages quietly. "It tells a story," the teacher said at last. "You should share it." On the night of the recital, the hall was full again. Parents filled the seats. Students waited nervously backstage. The grand piano stood in the center, strong and steady. When her turn came, she walked onto the stage with calm steps. The lights were bright, but they did not scare her anymore. She sat down and took a slow breath. Instead of beginning with a familiar classical piece, she played the first soft notes of her own melody. The room grew very quiet. The music started gently, almost uncertain, like someone testing the air. Then it built slowly, layer by layer. A stronger section came in the middle, filled with bold chords that carried deep feeling. But unlike the day of the crack, those chords did not feel forced. They felt balanced. As she played, she remembered everything. The whispers, the fear, the waiting, the support, the applause. All of it flowed into the music. When she reached the final note, she let it ring out fully. Silence followed. Then applause filled the hall, louder than before. Some people stood. Others wiped their eyes quietly. She stood and bowed, feeling warmth spread through her chest. After the recital, many people approached her. Some asked about the piece. Others simply said it made them feel something they could not explain. A representative from a small youth arts foundation, who had attended the recital, spoke with her parents. "We would like to support her continued training," the representative said. "There is something honest in her music." Her parents thanked them, still amazed at how far things had come. Later that night, back at home, she sat at the piano once more. The house was quiet. The borrowed instrument would soon need to be returned at the end of the year. But she was not worried. She had learned that music did not depend on one piano or one room. It lived in her. Her mother joined her in the living room. "Do you remember how scared you were that night?" her mother asked gently. She nodded. "And now?" She thought for a moment. "Now I'm glad it happened," she said softly. Her mother looked surprised. "If it didn't happen," she continued, "I might still be afraid to play loudly." They both smiled. The story that once felt like a mistake had become a turning point. The accusation that once made her doubt herself had pushed her to grow stronger. The crack in the piano had revealed cracks in quick judgment, in assumptions, and even in her own confidence. But it had also revealed something else: resilience. As the year came to an end, the Academy invited her to perform at a special community event celebrating young artists. This time, she did not feel nervous about strong chords or powerful endings. She welcomed them. Standing on that stage once more, she looked at the audience and saw not strangers, but listeners. She began to play. The music filled the space, clear and steady, rising and falling like breath. It moved beyond the walls of the building, beyond the town, beyond the memory of that rainy day. Somewhere in the audience sat the piano technician who had written the honest report. Nearby were teachers who had once doubted and later apologized. There were neighbors who had recorded the first video. There were classmates who had learned from her example. All of them listened. When the final note faded, she felt peace. She understood something important now. Talent is not measured by how loudly one can play. It is measured by how honestly one can stand back up after being misunderstood. The journey from blame to belief had not been easy. There had been tears, silence, and moments of deep doubt. But there had also been support, courage, and growth. As she stepped away from the piano and walked off stage, she did not think about the crack anymore. She thought about the echo of music that once seemed to cause damage but now carried hope. The echo of a young girl who refused to shrink her sound. And the echo of a simple truth. Sometimes what seems like a breaking point is really the beginning of something greater.